Consequently, there tends to be an overemphasis on the use of encryption within your network. You think if I encrypt everything and I get a hard boundary, I'm good. Wrong. That is a wrong assumption. And people use that as a vehicle. I want to talk about that. Depending on encryption across the core, particularly in a general sense, can be a very bad thing. One thing about privacy that is a misconception most security architects don't understand. Privacy is not security. Privacy can be the worst thing for security. Anonymity is the bad guy's tool. And if they can use your encryption services, they will gladly do so. And they will use you as a cover of darkness, use your system in order to mount attacks. And as was pointed out by the very good FBI agent who was up here, many times they'll do that on purpose to obfuscate the source so that they can hide. They'll use your machine in order to launch the attack, and that way it becomes a lot harder to identify the true cause. But let's just take a basic look at the paradigm here and the assumption we make when we start to use encryption without having a good idea of who's who. First of all, we have our client, we have our server, we have encrypted data. It looks good, right? You say, well, what the heck? I'm terminating my SSL or TLS connection right up to the server. My data's secure. I can even pipe it through a firewall. Some firewalls are evolving the ability to do heuristics checks on TLS, and we're doing that too. And yeah, there are certain things that you can look, handshake parameters, certain cyber suites that are identifiable to malware, that are very common to those approaches. We can identify those and pull those out. But you're still trusting the encryption data coming across. And if someone is skillful enough, you're not going to catch that. You're not going to catch it through heuristics. At that point in time, you have compromised machines using the encryption that you may trust. So once I compromise the machines that are using your encryption and you're trusting lateral encrypted movement across your core, how do you tell from compromised machines versus true machines that are run by authenticated users? You can't anymore. So now what happens is I have these compromised machines transgress across the firewall boundary. You pick the rule set, you match the tuple, it's all encrypted to me, bang, I have my attack. People use your encryption to ingress into the network architecture. You're blind to the malicious transport. You also have no idea of who is who and who's malicious and who's not. So this is the reason why trusting encryption too much across your core can be a very bad thing and becomes something that becomes leveraged, actually quite often, in many of these attacks that we see. Nobody attacks your network and lands at the database they're looking to attack. If they do, they should go to Vegas because, man, they are lucky. Because that is not how it works, okay? They have to learn as they ingress into your network, unless you're willy-nilly foolish about how you post your intellectual property information, okay? They have to discover it. So this is basically what happens at that point. I'm going to do OS scans. I'm going to use other tools, Metasploit, Kali. All of these tools can allow me to compromise different systems, okay? Armitage can give you a very good graphic user interface. It even puts lightning bolts around the machine once you compromise it, to identify the fact that, yeah, now you've got control of that device, okay? So a lot of these things aren't command line based anymore. They provide very eloquent graphic user interfaces that you can use, okay? So this results in what I call a cyber attacker compass. Basically, again, as I said, nobody gets where they want to get on the initial foray, unless you're extremely lucky or the enterprise is extremely foolish, okay? Usually they have to move. They have to have east-west movement. They need to move laterally across your network. They need to do it between systems, between groups, between network segments. And basically this happens and they move east and west across until they finally find another point of vulnerability. Once they do that, then they run the whole cycle that I talked about again. I identify my vulnerability, I find my exploit, I use the exploit to gain privilege escalation, I move closer to my target. I start to establish pivot points in your network infrastructure. Little places where I can camp and you don't know that I'm there. So let's take a look at these individual steps, because really the first thing, as I said earlier, is the footprinting phase, the scanning phase. This is where I don't want to touch you. I don't want you to know even that I have any interest in you. And this is where I use tools like social engineering, SET. Anyone ever hear of SET, Social Engineering Toolkit in Kali Linux? Fantastic tool, isn't it? Scary, scary, scary. These things are very well thought out. I met the guy who wrote SET. Great guy. Scary guy, but great guy. So, but the point is these tools are there. Exposure maps, Nmap, you can download that for free. Nessus, that's an online web service. Go up to Nessus, sign in, it's a free account. You can use it to check vulnerability on your web servers. Attackers use it, obviously, to check vulnerability on your web servers. Because I want to identify your vulnerabilities on the front end. Application fingerprints. We talked about it at Extreme. We use application fingerprints very, very effectively in security, but don't kid yourself. The bad guys use that too. They want to gate as much enumeration on your system as possible because it allows me to better identify vulnerabilities and exploits. Multigo, great tool. That is very similar to the tools you see on the TV. You know, where you got the big screen, you know, and you can move the different people and create relationships and find out who's talking to who's sending emails. Multigo will do that for you. I can profile you very effectively using public information I pull off the network, and Multigo's a very good tool to do that. Gain a footprint and a profile of you, to enumerate you as a user. Greenbone. Greenbone's a very effective tool as well. Again, comes for free with Kali Linux. Electronic surveillance, looking at CXO level DNS requests, you know, the whaling ventures, access from hotspots, hotels. Everyone knows about crack? Not the drug. Okay? Everyone knows about crack. Here's a little secret. I've been able to hack WPA2 for about 2 years now. Okay? When I went to certified ethical hacking, that was one of the things that we did in the class. I actually hacked WPA2. It's not easy. It requires a lot of capture, requires a lot of re-injection. If you've got an appropriate design widths for your environment, you will catch the anomalies, but you got to be looking, okay? So it's not an easy environment. So it's not as critical as what the press is making it out to be, although it does have to be fixed and addressed. But quite frankly, if you're going to depend on simple hashing and handshaking for your security, you know, that's just, it's a mathematical game. It really is, because sooner or later, someone's going to get the computing resources to break that. And that's really what happened with WPA2. Just now it's come time where the computing resources are there and the techniques have been honed out. But it's nothing new. It's been hackable for a while. Yet we've all sat around in this blissful ignorance, and only when this hit the news, last week, maybe a week before, and when it first hit the industry, now everyone's up in arms about it. Okay, we already have patches, by the way. You do have to get to certain levels of code before you can run those patches, though. Talk to our people, we'll straighten you out. That's if you have extreme wireless. Okay, the other point that I want to talk about, though, is there's a lot of manual methods as well. Acquaintances, meetings, making you think I'm somebody I'm not. Spying, social engineering, shoulder surfing. Walking into a boardroom or a conference room and taking note that someone did not erase the board from their last meeting. Done. Very easy to do nowadays. Just a photograph. We need a pill. We need some way to hold this. Everyone knows what this is. Can anyone tell me what this is called? You have cryptography, and then you have something else. It begins with an S. Steganography, yes. Steganography is the art of hiding things. So if I encrypt it and then I hide it, it becomes a lot easier. Here's a story. The Genghis Khan used to communicate across his empire, and the way he was able to move information secretly was he would take young boys and put them in the caravan. By the way, they ended up being Imperial Guard once they reached their destination, so they were treated very well, no abuse there. But what they would do is they would take these young boys, they'd shave their head. Then they would tattoo on an encrypted message on their scalp. Then they would let the hair grow back, put the boys into the caravan, they'd move down the Silk Road to the next kingdom, the Khan's brother or whatever, and there they shaved the heads and got the message. After that, the kids were put into Imperial Guard. They were trained appropriately and handled in that fashion. No one ever broke the way he moved data. No one could figure out how he moved data across such a massive distance, and that's how he did it. Steganography was a big piece of that. It was a very big piece of that when you think about it. And this is basically what this is. This is the ability to hide data. Does anyone know about a binary copy? Okay, it's a very easy thing. A binary copy is basically a DOS command line where I can actually binary copy a Word executable into an image file. So send you a JPEG, and inside I may have an executable, a Trojan, which would actually light up once you download it and open the picture. Okay, so there's many ways that you can embed this stuff directly into completely innocuous looking images or documents. And you can do this with anything. It doesn't have to be an image. I can inject into a spreadsheet. I can inject into whatever. That's all I need you to do is click on the file and open it, and then that executable starts. Or I might wait. Maybe I'll do it. The executable will come in, it'll install, and then it'll wait. It won't do anything until maybe you do something particular, or maybe it'll wait for a particular date. Okay? These are some of the methods that are used. And basically, again, this becomes the pill, the way that I can move into your network, but then I need the poison. I need the polymorphic code, the Windows Trojans, the keyloggers, yeah, Mac Trojans. Okay, don't think if you're not Windows, you're not liable. Does anyone know who the two most vulnerable systems are for the crack compromise? Linux and Android. Not Windows, not Mac. This is the command and control, otherwise known as the express ticket to Kernel Town. This is where I finally get in, and I actually can now become the man. I'm now God. This is basically some of the abilities that are used. Port 443 used quite a bit. I kind of just gave some sample domains. Notice the cryptic type of domains. Those are all dynamic. I'll bet you would never be able to find those in any search now. But notice that the use of the IRP port, use of dynamic ports, DNS and ICMP are often used as well, and the dynamic port ranges, the SPI fast flux that we talked about earlier being the best example of that, okay? So at that point, you don't even have definable port names you're able to look at anymore. Okay. With Fabric Attach, it is an 802.1 standard, 802.1 QCJ. It is not ratified yet, but it is in frozen draft. We're driving that through the working committee now. It is depended to be an authentication protocol for IoT devices. We use it against shortest path bridging, but it can be used really against any type of framework. We're actually developing it to work against an EVPN BGP framework, which Brocade is bringing to the table for us. So we can actually use the protocol in several fashions. It's designed to actually do authentication and policy placement of the device, realizing that we have no humans. Extreme network switches are now offering that in XOS release 22.3.1. Extreme WLAN access points are planned for the near future. We run it in the Open Network Adapter for the surge solution. I'll talk about that briefly. You can also download OVS. Go up to the Open vSwitch website, download OVS 2.4 Plus. Comes free. Comes free. So you can get good software for free too, not just the bad guy stuff. So two modes of operation. We can run Fabric Attach with a legacy core, or we can run it with SPB Fabric Connect. The way we basically embody this for the IoT solution is we have something called an open networking adapter. And as you can see, it looks like a Raspberry Pi, except it's a Raspberry Pi that you can take and throw up against a brick wall and then go and plug it in, it'll still work. Okay, so it's a very robust Raspberry Pi. Don't do that with a normal Raspberry Pi, it won't survive, I can guarantee you. So this is a very robust device, multi-core processor in the middle. It's running a carrier-grade Linux platform, and it has a KVM with OVS. And on this device, we can actually run filters at traffic flows. We can protect the IoT devices with those open flows. We can isolate traffic using encryption zones, using IPsec and TLS combinations. With Fabric Attach, it is an 802.1 standard, 802.1 QCJ. It is not ratified yet, but it is in frozen draft. We're driving that through the working committee now. It is depended to be an authentication protocol for IoT devices. We use it against shortest path bridging, but it can be used really against any type of framework. We're actually developing it to work against an EVPN BGP framework, which Brocade is bringing to the table for us. So we can actually use the protocol in several fashions. It's designed to actually do authentication and policy placement of the device, realizing that we have no humans. Extreme network switches are now offering that in XOS release 22.3.1. Extreme WLAN access points are planned for the near future. We run it in the the Open Network Adapter for the Surge solution. I'll talk about that briefly. You can also download OVS. Go up to the Open vSwitch website, download OVS 2.4 Plus. Comes free. Comes free. So you can get good software for free too, not just the bad guy stuff. So 2 modes of operation. We can run Fabric Attach with a legacy core, or we can run it with SPB Fabric Connect. The way we basically embody this for the IoT solution is we have something called an open networking adapter. And as you can see, it looks like a Raspberry Pi, except it's a Raspberry Pi that you can take and throw up against a brick wall and then go and plug it in, it'll still work. Okay, so it's a very robust Raspberry Pi. Don't do that with a normal Raspberry Pi, it won't survive, I can guarantee you. So this is a very robust device, multi-core processor in the middle. It's running a carrier-grade Linux platform, and it has a KVM with OVS. And on this device, we can actually run filters at traffic flows. We can protect the IoT devices with those open flows. We can isolate traffic using encryption zones, using IPsec and TLS combinations. Hopefully, I've given you a little insight in as far as how a hacker is going to approach you, the information components that they need in order to mount a successful attack, and their very, very dear need in order to stay undiscovered and quiet until they start to pull data out of your environment. Okay? Thank you very much for the session. I appreciate your time, and I guess I'll hand you back a few more minutes. Thank you.